We have one last concept in this chapter called beats. A very silly analogy to beats. If you've ever been sitting in your car or a car and you're waiting to turn left and you have the blinker on and you're watching your blinker because it's boring sitting waiting, but then you also compare your blinker to the blinker of the car in front of you. I do this every now and again just out of boredom and see if they beat and click and flash at the same time. And once in a while, you're like, oh, they match. But then look back a little bit later and they don't. So ultimately, the blinker in my car, my signal indicator, is at a slightly different frequency than the car in front of me. When we have two sound waves that are very close in frequency but not quite identical, we get a concept called beats. Now, if you remember superposition of waves, I'm going to draw my sound wave as a sine function. I know it's a longitudinal wave, so my sine function is representing high pressure and low pressure. If I have two waves that have slightly different frequencies, which means they're going to have slightly different wavelengths, we know total displacement of a medium is simply the summation of the two waves. So as I add the waves together, they're going to be in phase a little bit and out of phase, and in phase, out of phase, in phase, out of phase. And so we get this overall envelope of loud versus soft, loud, soft. And ultimately, what it ends up sounding like is a wah, 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 which sounds really kind of funny to put it that way, but that's what it ends up sounding like. I found a little demo to play for you so you can hear that. So individually, they sound the same. Do you hear that? Wah, 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 wah. That is the beats. What that ultimately is a variation of that loud, soft, loud, soft, loud, soft. We call that a beat frequency. So beat frequency is that variation. It's the frequency that we hear that wah-wah-ing. And again, that's just this variation of loud, soft, loud, soft. The beat frequency we hear is simply the difference between the two frequencies we are listening to. If I remember right, and that's that whole 10 seconds ago, that first frequency was 240 hertz of that tuning fork. The second tuning fork was a frequency of 238 hertz. So the beat frequency we heard was the absolute value of the difference between those two. So 2 hertz. So the wah, 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 wah that we were hearing was happening at 2 beats per second. So that's what we were hearing. The second one, F2, could have been 242 hertz. and ended up with the same beat frequency. And that's because 240 minus 242, absolute value would still be 2 hertz. So this beat frequency comes into play a lot in terms of tuning musical instruments. If you are in an orchestra or a band, you tune to a specific note so that everyone's playing based off of the same note. And if you are hearing beats, you know that it is out of tune. So we'll go through a couple concept questions as well as an example problem to explain this more. So beats, essentially just having 2 sound waves very close in frequency, but not exactly the same. When we hear that variation, so the wah-wahing, and the frequency at which that happens is based off of the difference between the 2 frequencies that we were listening to.